Today we have James Nagel here from Heliovolta. That is a photovoltaic, really think tank that takes a hard look at how photovoltaics are working out there in the field. Now, the reason I got to know James here, who's actually a local guy, he's from Seattle, which is where I'm from. He published a white paper out there that took a hard look at rapid shutdown. It was published in March of 2026. And it was really some inconvenient truths about rapid shutdown. The fact is, they are causing problems. Something within the rapid shutdown system is becoming problematic. Now, whether or not it's a device, installation, the fact that there's no reinspection required whatsoever of this fire and life safety system, we've seen these systems now on our rooftops in the commercial and industrial space, which is the C&I space. We've seen them there now since 2014. So we're 12 years into this. So the idea that this market space is still in its incubation phase, that is simply not true. This stuff's been around for a dozen years. And Heliovolta is finding what they believe are some problems. There's no question that there are some thermal incidents that are increasing. There's no question that the fires are increasing, right? The question is, what's the gap? What is the problem? Is it really rapid shutdown? Or is it something else that has to do with that whole dialect, which is the photovoltaic space within the energy space? What is the issue? So, James, you're finding more fires, you're finding more safety hazards. The fact is, this study went for 5 years. It was specific to the commercial and industrial space. Tell me what you found and tell me why you believe it's the rapid shutdown devices.
Yeah, thanks for that. And hey, everybody, I'm James Nagel, one of the co-founders at Heliovolta. And in a lot of the work that we do, we get involved with root cause analyses, system health assessments, field inspections, this type of thing. And we're a collection of engineers that go out to the field and do these things. And so why the RSD call out, right? And so we wanted to be very specific with our data set, right? So that we can be a third party that's non-biased, that's really trying to call out, exactly a very precise issue that we're seeing here. And so again, it's not residential systems that we're calling out here. It's not utility scale systems, which wouldn't have rapid shutdown devices anyway. It's really the CNI space that is in both of Chris and my backgrounds here. And so to be really precise, lets us say something a little bit more of a substance. And so in a lot of the fires that we've worked on, about 70% of those have pointed back to that rapid shutdown device. And so with a lot of the data that we have from this, and we have been very consistent with how we log issues, how we log failures, and this type of thing, has led us to some of the data-driven arguments that can really point to a product class that is showing up with a lot of issues there. So that was kind of the real push to do this in the first place. Because at the end of the day, right, when we're involved with conflict resolution, you really try to talk about positions and interests, and you always align on the interests first. You find that common ground, and everybody can get behind safe, reliable systems that keep firefighters out of harm's way, that keep everybody safe, but then also keep the systems and safe, and the people underneath those systems safe is really important too. So, I think, Chris, we've had a lot of good conversations so far, and just it's helpful just to remind ourselves that there is always that consistent interest that we do have the same safety, reliability interest in mind.
I think you're definitely talking really your fire service language, certainly during the emergent phase of an incident, which is when things are going wrong and you're there trying to really get things under control. And I can say from the firefighter's perspective, we have never seen so much of the rooftop space that now has photovoltaics on it. You can't get away from it. They are operating on these rooftops. They have to ventilate. Sometimes they have to do rescues through the rooftop. The fact is, this is a space that the fire service has been in for a very long time under emergency conditions, fire conditions. Now, these shock hazards that are up there are real, and they are very much tied to these photovoltaic systems. Rapid shutdown was put in place to help firefighters not end up being shocked in these spaces, or to at least reduce down the voltage so that if they did end up coming in contact with something that was compromised, the voltage would be less than 80, which was deemed reasonably safe for the fire service. Now, in 2014, when this work was put, when this safety feature was added to the NEC, it was championed by the fire service. It was something that was felt like it was really needed. We're 12 years into this. The fact that we don't see a lot of shocks in this space, to me, means the system is working. Now, I know to others they may say, "Well, that means you didn't need it in the first place." I don't need a whole bunch of shocked firefighters to prove that this system worked well, to prove that rapid shutdown was worth the endeavor, right? We shouldn't need that, should not be our barometer for safety. I tell you what, I do a lot of flying these days over the Pacific, and I'm so glad that the airline industry does not need a bunch of planes to go down before they start getting really, really safety conscious with how that thing flies. I look at everything in the firefighter space as, can we make this safer within reason? Right? We have to function. We need the energy. We're using rooftops because it's a great space to capture just some dead energy. I mean, I will be honest, I'm not a big fan of ground mounted utility scale photovoltaics. I don't like what it does to the land. I love it on buildings. I absolutely love it. It's such a great place for this. But with that goes the understanding that firefighters are going to be working in that space. And rapid shutdown, in my opinion, has helped to keep them safe. You're saying this has caused more fires. I want to ask you a couple of hard questions. One, why is there no compulsory training, certification, expectation that is mandatory for the photovoltaic installation space? And I mean mandatory across the country. Why is that not in place yet? What's going on? I know my
Yeah,
trade space. James, I want to hear your trade space. What are your thoughts?
absolutely. Yeah, and I think, it kind of comes back, as I've seen it, is just the maturity of the industry. And you've called it out earlier. It's not really a good excuse. I'll say that. I think that's the reason, but I don't think it's a good excuse, right? You mentioned earlier that RSDs have been part of the code, or the rapid shutdown function has been part of the code since 2014, right? We're 12 years after that, and so and that right there wasn't the start of this industry either. So we have decades under our belt of understanding what good looks like, what bad looks like, what unsafe looks like. And so there really isn't a good uh, excuse, but the reason is, we haven't prioritized it as an industry to mandate that through these pieces,
I will tell you
through
what,
through
James.
through
James,
credentials
I
and stuff.
think, James, I apologize to stop you there, but I think, and that similarity exists in the fire service too, right?
Mm,
When you say we haven't prioritized this yet, I mean, over my 30 plus years, that's what I saw was,
mm,
if we don't prioritize this thing, like we've never really prioritized energy hazard training. Of course, we don't understand it. Not really. Not unless you want to
mm,
talk about batteries, but batteries are this much of the energy hazard training space, and we do not prioritize it. So
mm.
I can empathize with that, James. And so I like that we can come to terms on that. The fact is, we're maturing into the space, and we need to make some changes. Here's my next question for you. Um, there is zero reinspection requirement for rapid shutdown features and devices. Now, I know for me, I consider that a fire and life safety feature. And I know even with the passive expectations of an externally mounted fire escape, every 5 years that has to be inspected. And that thing rarely even moves. It doesn't do anything except sit there on the side of a building, and it's got to be reinspected every 5 years. That is in the code, period. Um, there is no compulsory requirement nationwide to reinspect these systems once they're put in. Um, James, why is that? And how do you change that?
Yeah, I think. I think, you know, part of it is changing code, you know, and how people have addressed the code. You know, initially when a rapid shutdown function really came out, um, you had different postures to meet that code in different ways. And then that's kind of matured in different ways, for better, for worse. You know, you have a product class that may have emerged just to meet code while keeping things, you know, at a lower cost, right? So that's really the product class that we're calling out in our white paper. But with a lot of this movement, the the industry hasn't necessarily standardized around, okay, well, this part needs to be re-inspected every so often, right? This type of stuff. And I think, how do you address that though? I think it's through education. And so that's part of the intent of this white paper, is to just share our findings, to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. Here's why we're seeing it. Here are the, you know, the failure modes of these systems, you know, to look for, and all these types of things. And a lot of our clients, you know, will work on a fire that they might have, but then, you know, we'll help them look at the rest of their fleet and say, okay, given what we've seen over here, how do we stabilize the rest of things? And so a lot of the times it comes back to the asset owner, or even like the asset host, as we call it, the big box building that doesn't necessarily own the system on their roof. We call them the asset host. They're basically leasing that area. And it comes with a lot of work with them to define, hey, if you're going to be on my roof, you need to do these things. And it might be certain practices, it may be a certain cadence of reinspection and this type of thing. Because we found that that's been a bit more effective, because we don't have to wait for another code cycle. We don't have to go through this type of thing, or we don't need to worry about this AHJ or that team there necessarily. You know, if we can really work with those asset hosts, those asset owners, the O&M teams, all this type of stuff, to kind of drive from the market side rather than necessarily the code side, is kind of where we've positioned it, all the while having conversations as best we can with those with, you know, code making abilities. You know, we've submitted comments to the NEC and all this to affect that change from that angle. But we found it most effective on an education perspective, on teams actually implementing the systems, and then also the asset owners, asset hosts as well.
Certainly. Well, I can tell you from the fire department's perspective, we're going to be on these rooftops. There's a lot of work that gets done up there strategically to help improve conditions of the fire, get the fire out, and for people that may need to be doing searches inside, rescues. Um, the fire the fire service needs to feel like they can be safe on these rooftops from an energy standpoint, meaning I'm not going to get shocked, or if there is a shock hazard, it's going to be reduced substantially, which is the purpose of rapid shutdown. I love that your data set was just a commercial and industrial space, because I think in the single family, one and two family dwelling space, R3 space, very difficult to regulate. So I think for the context of this conversation and for your paper, I think that was really smart to do that. I think for the fire service, um, rapid shutdown has helped to make the environment safer for us. It will continue to. I'd hate to see us throw the baby out with the bathwater and see this removed from the NEC. I think that would be a massive mistake. And I think just based on reading the paper and our conversation, there's room for maturity within the space of rapid shutdown, and really within the photovoltaic space. So whether you're an installer, you're an asset host, right? You're an inspector, you're a re-inspector, you're a fire investigator. To me, what I read in that paper is that rapid shutdown, maybe part of the issue, but it may not be the device necessarily itself. It may be the fact that there's no maintenance required. There's no reinspection. That the fact that installation still seems to be a little bit feral, only in that there's no regulation that says you will do it this way, and here's the accreditations to prove that you are doing it this way, and you've been trained to do it that way. And I think that I know for the fire service, that's something that has really helped us mature even into the emergency response space, is there's a lot of accreditations, there's a lot of trade training that we have to have. And when I look at something that's so important, which is this photovoltaic space, um, your white paper has identified some problems without question. And I think some of those problems could be that we need more professional accreditations within your space. And I don't want to speak for your trade, but when I read through the white paper, it jumps right out at me. You know, it just jumps out at me. And maybe in the city of Los Angeles or the city of Phoenix, there are some expectations of accreditations, but absent a national standard, um, it's hard to say that this is going to move forward in a safe, maturing process. These things need to be national expectations for everybody. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I would agree, and I would add that it is on a lot of people's radars. There's some folks that are really focused on it. My friend Amanda Bybee um, an O&M collective is really pursuing this to really think about different levels of accreditation that is mandatory and um, working through the credentialing of that. And that team's called the Amicus O&M Collective. Really sharp folks that really see the concern there and seeing it as a barrier to a lot of our growth as an industry as well. So I'm right there with you. I think that to install these things, right, there needs to be a journeyman electrician on site, kind of supervising, kind of signing off on things. But that journeyman doesn't necessarily have a PV background. They might, and I hope they do, but it's not a requirement, right? And that like you've said, that dialect is still standardizing, is still uh, being mandated, and so that's something that a lot of people are working on, but we're not there yet.
Well, that's good. And again, within your trade space, you're the expert here. Um, Again, I believe in rapid shutdown. But within your trade space, it's good to hear that people are looking at this and looking to further professionalize this space. Because as you said, this is really a dialect. Photovoltaic is a dialect within the energy trade, within that space. And it's pretty unique. You have to understand that space really well. And to me, maybe that's what we're maturing into is that, sometimes we've got crews that have done thousands of systems, really understand they've been in the space long enough to truly be an apprenticed photovoltaic tradesperson. And then you have other ones where they're not. And I think what we need to accreditate some of that stuff. And again, from the outside of your trade looking in, that's kind of what I am seeing. For the fire service, moving forward, we want to support rapid shutdown devices. We want to understand why they're there. We want to understand how to actually activate rapid shutdown, which is pretty simple. We want to understand how these things function as isolation devices also, and the fact that we can work on these rooftops safely. And one of the things that we never promote, and this is just a reminder as we close up this interview for the fire service, is one of the best things we can do is identify these systems as early in the emergency as possible and radio that information out to the rest of the emergency scene. So something where you identify these things on the rooftop, it might be engine 25 to incoming units, energy hazard, rooftop, photovoltaic. With proper training, that is very clear as to what the issue is and where it's located. And that's really what you want for crews coming in. You want to identify it early. Next, you really want to discourage and avoid any damaging contact with the panels themselves or the circuitry wiring that they're connect to. We never promote that, even with rapid shutdown when we know that it's going to be safer. We simply don't damage these panels. We don't cut into them. We don't do that. We don't cut into the circuitry or anything like that. We can cut all around that stuff. If we can identify the circuitry, we can cut pretty close to it. But we have to be able to identify the circuitry because we really want to ensure that we are not damaging these systems deliberately. That is never in our best interest. That is dangerous every bit of the time. Even with rapid shutdown, you're exposing yourselves unnecessarily to shock hazards. We would never support anything like that. And so, just to recap for the fire service, strategically, there's some really basic things we use to operate around these systems. In closing, I want to thank everybody out there for taking the time to listen to this interview with James Nagel. He is an expert within the photovoltaics field. I will tell you, I have enjoyed all of our conversations going back months now. I loved reading the white paper, despite the problems that I did have with it. But I think for the fire service, we need to continue to be engaging with these hazards, with these energy systems. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to HelioVolta, go to their website, read their material. It is thought-provoking. It is the kind of things that where if you really want to understand the energy space within your trade, which is the fire service, you have to start reaching into the trade space and working with the experts. And that's really who I see with James Nagel as an expert within that trade space. And that's somebody I'll be looking to for advice and information for many years to come, I'm sure. James Nagel, I want to thank you for chatting with me. I want to thank HelioVolta for publishing the white paper and being available and so transparent with all of our conversations. Fantastic conversation. So, James, I want to thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's been great. Good chatting.
All right, all of you. As always, thanks for making energy hazard training a priority. That's it. And
Cool.
stop recording.